I've come across an absolutely adorable game called Stravagante. It is by Penflower Inc. 2023, and you are looking at the full download of it. As far as I can tell, this is the full download of it. It is a regular RPG, but it also has rules and support for cooperative play, GM-less play, or play where there is not one person who is the GM. And we're going to take a look at all of this material. The artwork is just, at least to my mind, incredibly inviting and charming. And the prompts that it offers are wonderful. So I'd like to show it to you here and get you familiar with what there is. Now, the only thing that I think is missing here, and I can't figure out if it doesn't exist or if I haven't been able to find it, is anything that is pre-existing enemies, like in some sort of bestiary. So that said, let me show you what is here. And we're going to start actually not with the rules. We're going to start with the character creation booklet or booklets, because I think that gives a real flavor of what the game is about. There are 4 stats in the game, and well, I guess I will go to the rule book to show you what those are. We have the stats are actually, they function as a pool for energy points, and that you can spend these energy points during the game, not during combat, but during other aspects of the game. If you're walking around, if you're interacting, you can spend your stats of wit, dexterity, stamina, and sociability, which is charm, confidence, or approachability. So if you want to do an action in the game, you spend from your relevant stat, and your stats are going to be created by simply rolling 4d6. Now, I believe it says you can choose to have one stat or multiple stats actually empty, or you could assign, so in this case I rolled 2 6s and 2 2s, you could assign those values to these stats. And then during the course of play, if you wish, you can spend down the relevant stat to ensure either a total success at what you're attempting to do, a partial success, which comes with 1 complication, or a weak success, which comes with 2 complications. Or you could do a luck roll, which is simply rolling a d6 and taking your chances, but not spending down any of your energy points. There is advantage and disadvantage in the game for various things. So the advantage is going to give you a lesser energy cost to get more success, or a +1 to the luck. And disadvantage is going to cost more energy, or -1 to the luck. There are also skills that your PC will have, the things you're good at, and flubs, things you are bad at, as well as conditions in the game that are thematic to what might happen. You might be cursed or blessed or hindered or hurt. So now let's take a look at the little character creation booklet here and show there's a very simple way of, you roll for your stats and then you roll or choose your kin. And you can see here again just the very cute nature of the game. So you have 6 options for your kin and your related traits. Gravekin, these are undead creatures such as ghouls, skeletons, and vampires, and these are playable characters. So thematically, for example, the Gravekin traits are, and you will be choosing 3 traits, and one of them needs to be related to your kin. Nocturnal, so they could be hurt by sunlight, but they can see in the dark. Rotten, a leech needing fresh blood in order to rest, but then you get additional rest if you have that blood. And resting is a way of restoring those energy points. Or they could have the sicken trait, so they're not hurt from poison or disease, but they are hurt from medicine and healing magic. There's cavekin, subterranean creatures such as goblins, dwarves, and moles. When I was playing this, I rolled up a mole. Anthony the mole was one of my characters, and Anthony had easy squeezy. He could squeeze into and through spaces half his size. He could be a burrower, get advantage on digging holes or tunnels in the earth with hands or claws. Littlekin, I rolled up a gnome. I had Fidget the gnome and Anthony the mole. That was my characters in my game. And they could be gnomes, fairies, bugs, and mice. They could perhaps fly. They're tiny as a trait possibility, so they get to some advantage on evading harm with bigger creatures. But they have disadvantages on sociability rolls, so maybe it's harder for them to interact. The middlekin are average-sized surface-dwelling bipeds, such as elves and humans. And the largekin are very big or tall, such as trolls, tree folk, bears, or dinosaurs. They can be tough. They can resist hurt from piercing or slashing, but they have a disadvantage on actions using dexterity. And finally, the beastkin. They're part humanoid, part animal creatures, such as minotaurs, mermaids, and harpies. And they could perhaps be fluffy and resist hurt from cold, but they have a disadvantage on sociability actions if they're not bathed every 3 rests. So these are the kin and related traits, and you get those as mentioned. Then you're going to either roll or choose a class and 3 skills that come with your character. And here are the classes and related skills. There is a warrior, a minstrel, a knight, a priest, a bandit, and a mage. And then there is a list of suggested equipment. And you can see right here, both from the listing of the related skills as well as the suggested equipment, that the game has built into it. There's not that you're determining a lot about what it might mean, for example, to have the appraising skill as a mage, or really any of the skills. And it does say here that you choose three skills total, 2 related to your class and 1 that you make up. So from the outset, you are, as the player, as you would expect in a game with such a small amount of rules, to bring your imagination and creativity right there. And you also come up with any flubs for your character. So for example, in my case we're looking here at how I had, we'll look here at Anthony. The gnome had, his flubs were, he was good at lockpicking, hiding, and scouting, but he was also messy and imprecise, and he was also greedy. So when he went in to do things, though he was good at certain things and like getting certain places, he left a trail, and it made it easier for him to be found. And he also kind of continued to try to get something when perhaps he should have left. So those were his, in that case, I made them kind of thematic to flesh out what a personality might be. And then you get to choose 1d6 plus 1 items of equipment, which is from this list here. Again, you will be deciding exactly what the impact of having perhaps a sewing kit or a weapon might be. There is not a list of weapons. So I gave my gnome a small sword. I think I called it a tiny sword, in keeping with his character. And finally, you get to roll 2d66 for treasures. And there are the list of treasures here. There's questions here at the bottom about how you acquired your treasure. What do they mean to you? So trying to, again, flesh out some character, perhaps backstory related to a treasure, or some of these treasures might even be considered trinkets. In the case of the game that I'm playing, one of my characters got a letter, and I decided that actually formed the basis of the story and the quest that they were trying to do. It had to do with returning this letter to a faraway library. And you're given some sample characters in the booklet so you can see how they could be created and what the traits and treasures are, and how these treasures were fleshed out a little bit to create a narrative story about this. So the picture locket that this character has contains a small line drawing portraits of her father and younger sister back home, as well as a fine hat that was given to her by her music teacher, and she is a minstrel. She never wears it, but uses it to collect coins or offerings when she's performing on the streets or in taverns. So you start to get, with all of that, she likes to tell jokes and cook, but maybe she's not such a great cook, that you got to start to get a feeling of about this character. And here's another character who is a mousefolk character who's a bandit. And we have their treasures fleshed out also. These sturdy gloves were from their time working in the royal gardens. Even though they now work to strip the monarchy of their ill-gotten wealth, they remember the tranquility of the gardens fondly. So, and then the silver ring, their very first bit of loot taken from the king's own chambers. So again, a feeling about what this little character, this little mousefolk character could be. And then the last page of this booklet just has some room for notes. So moving back to the rest of the rules and the kind of support for this system, the complications, as mentioned, when you are rolling to do something, you will be either succeeding or failing. And if you do have a complication, you have a table that you can roll on to see what the complication actually is. And again, this is going to help you as a soloist or collective playing to guide the narrative. So if a complication is someone must face their fear, that's going to send you in a story direction, as opposed to if the complication is a terrifying discovery. So this table becomes very important in giving you some structure against which to continue to create your story. The combat is referred to and handled as a tight spot. That's a high-risk situation where you're facing a threat, such as some sort of hazard or opponent, and it's explained to you how they're played basically in turns and what it means to have advantage or disadvantage, and the level of threat is the outcome of what is going to happen if something bad happens or a complication. This is important. During a tight spot, all PC actions must be performed as luck rolls. And as a reminder, the luck roll is really just rolling the d6 so that you are not spending these energy points during a combat situation. You are, because then you could just like expend them, have a success, and move on. So it's really explicitly, I mean, it's called luck and it's explicitly luck. And I do like that because it just owns up to what die rolling really is, which is just random and luck. And it gives a sense of not knowing what's going to happen and having to deal with the complications that arise here. And whether or not it is a high, moderate, or low threat, you have the outcomes of what is going to happen to you. And some of these, like, for example, hindering these are the conditions that are mentioned to here. So if you become hindered, you're getting a disadvantage. So it thematically works out because the less success you have, the harder it is to overcome that. And that is how combat or any type of threat, perhaps you encounter a trap or something, would be handled here. And finally, there are some light armor, minimum armor, and heavy armor as equipment here. As said, there is not a listing of weapons per se, but in the equipment, you could just choose to have a weapon. And then the continuing toll of the battle here explains that if you are seriously injuring or killing someone in the game, your sociability stat is going to go down. And that is interesting and sort of reflective of perhaps the nature of this game as one that might be geared toward being slightly more friendly, because you are penalized for actually killing someone in that way. There is magic in the game, wonderful magic, that you can have a spellcasting skill, and you are going to have a magic stat from which you're going to spend your experience points to cast spells. And then you can cast the spells as many times as possible. The spells themselves are crafted by rolling on this table. And we've seen this table before in other games, or not this table, but we've seen this concept of spells being created on the fly, as it were, in other games. And I find that this is, again, something very prompting of creativity and imagination and narrative to fit into the story as it goes. So they're giving some examples here. You could roll up slippery mist, create a shroud of mist which makes the ground under slick with condensation. Anyone walking through it must succeed in a luck roll or become hindered and stuck. Or you might roll up a bolstering stone, enchant a pebble or rock to speak words of support and encouragement to whoever holds it. And you do that once per rest. And again, rest is where you are recovering your experience points. Upon hearing the stone, they become inspired. So this table is, you could just, again, you could get a ghostly crystal as a spell and then decide what that is, or a boiling curse. That would be a good spell, a boiling curse. And then we come to resting. At the end of the day, or whenever the guide or players feel appropriate, you can rest to recover these experience points. To rest, you roll 1d6, and then you recover that number of experience points equal to the result in any stat. So you could have a rest that's a bad rest and just roll a 1, or you could have a great rest and roll a 6. Now, when you rest is important, and that is something that when I was playing, I kind of predetermined. I basically did a roll down kind of thing to say when I would be able to rest using a D10, how much time I was going to have before I rested. That is the one piece that gets a little challenging when playing solo, is to kind of determine when it is time to rest. And you want to create situations where you feel like you might be running out of energy, you might be getting tired. So kind of managing that is a little tricky. And then we have essentially what's called progression, which is leveling up. I'm not going to get into that. Ending the game ends whenever the players feel it's appropriate. And we have essentially the GM advice here to play with a guide and to play without the guide. And it says here, if your game has a guide, they don't need to roll for complications and threat turns, but you can make the selection themselves. And then playing without a guide. In this mode of play, the guide's responsibilities are shared equally between all players, or I would say between you and yourself if you're playing solo. You build the world together and use the complication and threat turn roll tables to manage those kinds of things. And then there is a suggestion of how you can move through a story to get the quest, make a plan, turn it into action, and resolve it. There's also some ways of adding levels of difficulty to the game and some safety notes for that. And then there is the pamphlet of prompts. And the pamphlet of prompts is a very succinct but actually quite rich pamphlet that is going to give you tons of stuff, including, we're going to start by looking first here at the map generator. So there is a great system here for using a bunch of rolls of 2d6. They're creating a 6x6 map, and you roll your 2d6 to create numbers on this map and then refer to this chart here to determine what the terrain is. If you roll up a settlement, what the settlement is, to give weather, and then suggesting to go to either the spell descriptor table that we already saw, or the adjective table that we're going to look at in a second to add flavor to it. And they show you a whole example here of how you come up with a map that has an ancient village, a haunted fortress, a screaming volcano, and a creepy hut. You could play this map if you wanted to, but this is a wonderful generator, very, very efficiently done. When I was playing, I decided I was going to do exploration, so I didn't build out a whole map. I just rolled a few places, and then that began where I was going to. I had a city, a walled city, and then I had a mansion that my characters were traveling to because there was a library there, and they had to deliver this letter to the library. We have an NPC generator with personalities, goals, appearances, professions, and quirks. We've got adjective table that was referred to before that you could use to pair very easily on your map. So you could get something that's creepy or energetic or mysterious. We have a reward table for your complications that you successfully overcome. It will give you what the options are. And a magic item generator here, which will focus in large part on the rules of the game, so you can restore energy points or remove bad conditions. And there's an example here, like a potion of wisdom that you can generate from this. We also have adventure prompt generators. So we have a verb table, an object table. These are 36 entries to create an adventure, and a person table and a location table. And it gives you an example here of something you could generate. Acquire the monstrous medicine from the creepy hermit in the old tavern. And let's see, I think I covered it all. The amount that you get in this cute little small little package is really a lot, and it is really supported to do what I would call sort of co-op sharing the GM responsibilities, as well as solo play, in addition to just kind of regular play. And as I said, the only thing that isn't here is a way or a short even rule set or series of mechanics like we have for the magic item generator to generate opponents or enemies that may be traveling around. Now, you could, I imagine, use the NPC generator sort of in conjunction with the character creation to roll up, an enemy gravekin, for example. But I didn't see here a little formula for doing that or suggestions for doing that. So that was I was expecting that, given everything else that's here. If I've missed it in the comments, please let me know where to find it, because I want it. But what is here is excellent. And of course, you could go outside of this to any other materials that you have that have enemies, beasts, whatever flavor you want to fit into your story to fill that out. And that's what I did when I was playing. But I recommend checking this out. It's cute, it's portable, it's easy to understand, intuitive, and baked into it is tons of support for self-generating narrative, so you can play this solo or co-op as well.